So we're actually going to kick off a new series today called After God's Heart. And really, I know we're kicking it off today, but really we've kind of been in this series over the past few times that I've spoken here as we've begun to really look at what God's heart is and what his heart is for. We've been looking over the past few weeks of God's heart is not to destroy people, and God's heart isn't to punish people, but that God's heart is to rescue them and to save them, not to condemn them. We talked about the prodigal son and the parables in Luke 15 and the stories that Jesus taught in Luke 14 about his heart for the lost, that his house would be full, that we would go into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, that we would receive people back even when they walked away, that if anything was lost, that we would do our part to go and find it. When we've looked at these things, we even looked at the desire of the Father's heart. We looked at the two sons, paralleling the two different sons and their view of the Father and how it affected their walk with God. Today, I want to kind of turn in, and for the next couple weeks, we're going to focus in on the life of David, because the Bible says that David was a man that was after God's own heart. And so we're going to look at that real quick. 1 Samuel chapter 13 is the first place that it says it. And this was after Saul's kingdom was being taken. In 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 14, it says, "Now your kingdom will not continue." He's talking to Saul here. "But the Lord has sought a man who would be after his own heart. And the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord has commanded." And so Samuel is telling Saul the next person who is going to be king is not going to be who man wants. The next person who's going to be king is going to be one that God chooses, because it's going to be a person who is after God's own heart. Even in the book of Acts, this phrase is referred back to. In Acts chapter 13, it says that after removing Saul, it said that he raised up David as their king and testified about him, "I have found David the son of Jesse to be a man after my own heart, and he will carry out my will in its entirety." Now, when you think about that phrase, "man after his own heart," I think there's a couple different ways that I listen to it and I look at it. Like, if you're after the heart of somebody, like you're trying to find what makes them tick. You're trying to find what matters to them and what's important to them. And really, that's what we've looked at over the past few weeks, is that the lost matter to God, that he loves people, that he's not trying to destroy, he's not trying to condemn, he wants to rescue, he's out to seek and to save that which was lost and everything. So we've been looking at the aspect of what is near and dear to God's heart. But I think the other aspect of it is we will use that phrase sometimes, that's a man after my own heart. And when we say that, it's usually like they're saying something that we agree with. Like, if they say soccer stinks, I'd be like, that's a man after my own heart. That would be it. Now, you and I, we kind of have a difference of opinion on that, but we connect in the realm of basketball, and the other things that are there. But, and so a lot of times we'll use that phrase, a man after our own heart, being that they like similar things. They have a similar mindset of what we have. And I think that's what we see in David, is that there were aspects of the way that David dealt with people. There were aspects of the way that of David's trust in God and things that really showed that he had a heart that was after God, that he had a heart that lined up with God's heart. And I don't know about you, but I want that to be said of me. I want people to say, Brandon is a man after God's heart. Like, I don't want it to say by just people. I want God to say that about me. Like, he's after my heart. The way that he interacts with people, the way that he does things, the way that he says things, like that's after my heart. That's near and dear to my heart. And when we look at David's life, we're going to fast forward real quick through his life and get to a couple scenarios and things. But David was just a shepherd in a field. And at this point, when King Saul was being, when Samuel comes to Saul and says, "I'm going to remove you," David was just a young teenager who was watching his father's sheep. And he really wasn't even thought of that much by his father, because later God tells Samuel, "I want you to go to the house of Jesse, and I want you to anoint, I'm going to show you which son that I want you to anoint as king there." And so Samuel goes there with this purpose to anoint the next king. And as he goes to anoint the next king, Jesse invites all of his sons except for David. He leaves David in the field. And so Eliab and all the brothers, they walk through and they pass by Samuel. And Samuel's like, "No, none of these are them. Is there anyone else?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, I mean, David, the youngest, is that, but he's out keeping the sheep." Like, even in that moment, like, he wasn't only left off the list, the invite list, but even when Samuel's like, "There's got to be somebody else," he was like, "Yeah, I mean, David's there." But like, he wasn't even, it was like, I mean, him, it wasn't even, he didn't even think enough of him, like, "Oh yeah, I forgot David. We need to invite him." It's like, he's just a shepherd boy. He's just watching the sheep. That's all he does. He wasn't thought of as anything special. And then, of course, he comes and God tells God tells Samuel that David was the one, and he said, "Stop looking at the outward appearance. God looks upon the heart. This is the one that I've chosen," and he anoints him there to be king. Now, if we were anointed to be king, and we're a teenager, like, your natural response is you're going to go straight to the kingdom and just walk up and be like, "All right, I'm king now," and kind of take over. But David didn't even David went right back to following his sheep. David didn't try to get a following of the army. David didn't try a social media campaign to try to get people to follow him or anything like that. He didn't go around trying to be a politician and earn people's favor so that he could take the throne. He just simply went back to watching his father's sheep. He went back to his everyday life. In 1 Samuel 16 later, we see that he was invited in, that there's this period that when David was anointed, it says that the Spirit of God departed from Saul, and there was an evil spirit that was tormenting him, and some of his directors and people that were with him told him, "You need to find somebody who can play music real well and have them come in." And so they invite David in, and David comes and plays the harp, and he's there, and then he goes right back and keeps the sheep. And when Saul needs him, he comes and he's there. Now, this is the throne that he has been anointed to take. And yet he comes and he just serves. And in fact, it even says that he found him so faithful that Saul brought him in to be an armor bearer. Now, armor bearer had to be one of the most trusted people that you had, because in your artillery and your uniform and everything that you had in the military, you had everything on the front covered, but nothing was covered on the back. And your armor bearer was somebody who in battle would watch your back. The armor bearer was somebody who was there to protect you, that was there to fight for you and help carry the weight of things that you were doing and everything. And Saul liked him so much that that's what he put him in doing in chapter 16. But then in chapter 17, where do you find David again? He's right back watching the sheep again. And as he's watching his sheep, his dad comes to him and says, "Hey, I want you to go deliver lunch to your brothers." Now, David could have easily been said, "Hold on, wait a second, I'm the king here." They can get their own lunch. Like, I have been anointed. Dad, do you remember when God passed over all those knuckleheads and he anointed me, right? But he didn't do that. He goes and he delivers the food. And as he is delivering the food, he encounters his brother, and he's bringing the food, and his older brother begins to accuse him. "Oh, you're just here because you wanted to see a fight. I know the evil that's in your heart." And David's like, "What did I do? Dad wanted me to be your Uber Eats. He wanted me to deliver this. He DoorDashed some food for you. Why are you upset at me? You should be tipping me right now. I mean, come on." And everybody stays back and they're afraid and they won't fight. But David steps up and he fights the battle. So he kills Goliath, and he begins to get this recognition and everything that's around. And the women in the city begin to write songs about how Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed 10,000s. So if you're somebody who is really about just finding your place on the throne, like now is the time to strike. Like they are already, not only have you been anointed, but everybody knows that you killed Goliath. They know how bad you are. They know how strong you are. Nobody wants to really fight you because you just knocked out a giant that they were all afraid of. And here, all the people in the city, you got the support, and they're singing songs about how you've killed 10,000s, and that guy only killed 1,000. He's not that good. But he doesn't do that. We're going to pick up the story there in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 7. It says that the women begin to sing to one another, and they declared, Saul has struck down his thousands, but David his 10,000s. Verse 8 says that Saul then was very angry, and that they were saying that what they were saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, but they've only ascribed to me thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? And then it says, and from that day forward, that Saul eyed David. He kept an eye on David. Some translations say he had a jealous eye toward David. He no longer wanted him as an armor bearer, but now he's jealous. He's intimidated. He's afraid he's going to take the throne, which, by the way, David had already been anointed for, but had never taken. And still, even in this, David goes back and he serves. The very next thing that we see in verse 10 is the next day a harmful spirit from the Lord came and rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre. So here, as he's just doing whatever's necessary. You need me to be an armor bearer, I'll be an armor bearer. You need me to you need me to kill a giant, I'll kill a giant. You need me to play my harp, I'll play a harp. Whatever that means, he's still serving so faithfully the man that he has been anointed to replace. It says he was playing his lyre, and he did this day by day. And Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul hurled the spear at him, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. Now you would think that after this happening one time, David isn't showing back up to play the harp anymore. I mean, if somebody threw a spear at you and tried to kill you, if your boss just pulls out a gun and takes a shot at you, are you coming back to work the next day? If you are not very smart. But look at this. It says, but David evaded him twice. David not only let him throw one spear, but David showed back up to do it again, to serve the king who was throwing spears at him again. And then he threw it at him a second time. So now, okay, David has been anointed. He's got the people following him. And the king has gone crazy. Now is the time to take the throne and take over, right? Nope. Instead, he goes and he talks to Saul's son, and they begin to have a plan. You know, he's like, hey, I need to know if Saul's going to kill me. So Jonathan goes to find out if he's still angry with him, if he's still wanting to kill him, if he's still wanting to wipe him out. You know, like David was fully intended that if Jonathan would have came back and said, nah, he's good now, David would have went back again and faced the potential thing of having a spear thrown at him again. But after they did the thing, Jonathan said, he's gone. You got to run. You got to get out of here. And so David runs for his life. Now, here, he's been anointed. He's got the backing of the people. People have seen how crazy Saul is. He could easily be like, he's a madman now. He's got the backing of the king's son who says, I am with you. You are supposed to be the next king of Israel. And yet he still doesn't try to take it. Instead, he runs. And when he runs, he flees to this group of priests, and he asks them if they have any food, and they end up giving him some bread, and he gave him the sword of Goliath, and so that he could have it and be able to protect himself and everything. And then as he goes on and he's hiding in the wilderness, Saul comes after him with this huge army of people. He comes with 3,000 of the choice soldiers, which means the best fighting soldiers were chasing after him. And David is running for his life. And as he's hiding, one of the priests from the city that had helped him comes running to him and gives him a report that Saul had found out that David had got some food from the priest, and he not only killed the priest that helped him, but wiped out every single other priest except for the one who escaped. He went in, and I think it was like 82 or something. Like it wasn't like there were 3 priests and he killed 3 priests or anything. Like I think it was like 80 some priests that Saul went in and wiped out and destroyed. Saul is not just trying to kill David. Saul is murdering the people who are supposed to represent God to the people. And only one of them survive. And he runs and he tells David about what happened. Again, you would think, David, now's the time. Let me go wipe this guy out. But he doesn't. You fast forward a little bit more to 1 Samuel chapter 24. And it says this. It says, Saul returned from following the Philistines, and he was told, behold, David is in the wilderness and in Gedi. And then Saul took 3,000 of his chosen men out of Israel and went to seek after David and his men in front of the wild goats' rocks. And he came to the sheepfold by the way, and there was a cave. And Saul went in to relieve himself. So Saul has to take a rest stop on the journey of chasing after them. Relieving himself means he had to take a potty break. He goes into a cave so that he can have some privacy. And it says, but David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave. Now, I know this is church and I know this is the Bible and everything, but sometimes we just pass through and read some things. You've got to slightly picture, don't fully picture this story, because that'd be really, but just slightly kind of vaguely get a picture of this story that Saul goes into this cave to relieve himself. And I don't think that it was a number 1, because he was in there for a while. Okay? And David and them are in the back of the cave, and they're dug down. And now the man who's trying to kill him is right there. And he's in a quite vulnerable position. And David's men look at him and say, hey, this is the day that the Lord said to you. Even that phrase is a little bit crazy. Like, did God really tell David that one day you're going to be in a cave? And King Saul will enter into the cave and he will be relieving himself and you can wipe him out in that moment. No. He says, behold, I will give your enemy into your hands and you shall do with him as it seems. So David has the people behind him. David is going to have all the religious people behind him because Saul's went in and wiped out all the priests. David already has proven himself. David has already been anointed. But even though the person who now has 3,000 people trying to kill, it's not just him trying to spear him to a wall. He's got 3,000 choice warriors after him. And David doesn't spear him. He walks up and he cuts a little piece of his robe off the back. the minute that he cuts the robe, David begins to feel convicted. Verse 5 says that afterwards, David's heart struck him. He was convicted by cutting. He could have killed him and said, it's self-defense. He's got an army after me. And nobody in the kingdom would have said anything about it. They would have been like, yeah, King Saul's crazy. He killed all the priests. I heard he tried to spear you. I read it on Instagram that he didn't just throw one spear, he threw a second spear at you. Like, somebody caught the Instagram reel video and like we saw it. It was bad. You had every right to take his life. He doesn't take his life. He takes a corner of the robe. And he says, the Lord forbid that I should do anything to hurt my Lord the anointed and to put my hand against him, seeing that he is the Lord's anointed. And here's the thing. David was anointed too. But God hadn't removed Saul completely from that position yet. And David was refusing to take it in his own hands. It says, so David persuaded his men with these words, and he wouldn't permit them to attack. And Saul rose up and he left the cave and he went on his way. So Saul leaves. Story's over. Everybody can take a deep breath. Suspenseful music can stop. David survived. But David had cut the robe. And David felt convicted for cutting the robe. Why? Because the robe was a sign of the authority. He was coming against that. And the spirit of his heart was so tender that he's not going through the thing. He tried to kill me. But he feels convicted because he cut the robe. And it says that David arose and he went out of the cave and he called after Saul. Like, this doesn't seem like a smart thing to do. You were just in a position where you could have been caught and you were cornered in a cave. All of the army could have came in and you could have been completely wiped out and eliminated. And he's got 3,000 and you don't have nearly that that's in the cave with you. Like, this is not the time to jump out and say, hey, I'm here. And David jumps out of the cave. And he cries out to Saul. And look at what he says. My Lord the king. He shows the man who tried to kill him honor. The man who is chasing him with an army. He still shows the person honor. Why? Because God cares about every single individual. God's desire is that we all honor and we love each other and that we do that even in disagreement. And David, at the threat of his life, still shows honor to the man who's throwing spears and trying to kill him. And it says that Saul looked behind him and David bows. He not only spoke honor, he displayed honor. And he bows down before the king. And it says that he put his face to the earth. This is a man who has thrown spears at him. You don't turn your back on somebody who's throwing spears at you. And you definitely don't bow your face to the earth. But David bows his head to the earth, and it says he paid homage. And David said to Saul, why are you listening to the words of men who say that David is trying to harm you? Behold, today I had you in my hand in the cave. The Lord brought you into my hand. And some people tried to tell me to kill you, but I spared you. And I said, I will not put out my hand against the Lord, for he is the Lord, my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. He says, see my Father. Do you sense? I'm not coming after against my Lord. See my Father. Like, do you see the honor that he's still showing? See my Father, the corner of your robe is in my hand. For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your robe and I didn't kill you, you should know and see that there is no wrong or there's no treason that is in my hands. I haven't sinned against you, though you haunt my life to take it. And may the Lord judge in between you and me. And may the Lord avenge me against you. But my hand will not be against you. If I did wrong, then let God judge me for it. If you're wrong, then God can judge you for it. But one thing that I'm not going to do is I am not going to shed innocent blood. I'm not going to throw a spear back. I'm not going to attack back even though I'm under attack and I'm under siege. And let God be the judge of the things. When David is down in this position, he is in the position very easily to be murdered, to be killed. And you see, he's like, my life is completely in God's hands. My future is completely in God's hands. And I am not going to take it into my hands and try to make something happen. He kept refusing to take the throne. He kept refusing to throw spears back. He kept refusing to do those things. And he even tried to wave it. It even revealed himself when he didn't have to try to bring peace, to say, Saul, I don't know who you're listening to. I don't know why you're believing these things, but I had the opportunity to take your life. I had the opportunity to do away with you, but I wouldn't do it because you're the Lord's anointed. And at that point, for the first time probably in a while, Saul began to feel a little bit of conviction himself because Saul began to apologize. In verse 16, it says, as soon as David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, is this the voice of my son David? And Saul lifted his voice and he wept. And he said to David, you are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. Does that sound like a scripture to anybody? Romans chapter 12 says, do not overcome evil with evil, but overcome evil with good. Even before Paul penned these words out to the church in Rome, David was living it out before a king who was trying to murder him. Why? Because he had God's heart. He was a man after God's heart. He wasn't a man after a throne. He wasn't a man after a mission. He was a man after God. And he knew that if God wanted him to be king, then God was powerful enough to bring him to the place to be king. And he didn't have to do it on his own terms. And he didn't have to sin along the way to make it happen. He didn't, and nobody would have even considered it murder. It would have been self-defense. But he refuses to do it. Verse 18 says, and you've declared this day how you have dealt well with me, in that you did not kill me kill me when the Lord put me into your hands. For if a man finds an enemy, will he let him go away safe? He's like, what person would do this? So may now the Lord reward you with good because of what you've done to me this day. And now behold, I know that you surely will be the king, and the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Now swear before me this, that when the Lord gives you the kingdom, that you will not cut off my offspring before me, and you will not destroy my name out of my Father's house. Why did he say this? Because the tradition was that when you would overthrow a kingdom, that you would wipe out any potential descendants to the throne. And David said, he swore this to Saul. And Saul went away home, and David and his men went up to the stronghold. They had a conversation. They talked it out. Saul leaves, and everything seems to be good. In a storybook, it would say, and they lived happily ever after. This isn't a storybook. This is a man who, because of jealousy, this is a man because of his own pride, this is a man because he's been rejected by God, has opened himself up for evil spirits to attack and to influence him. And in the moment when he's in his right mind and he's in his senses, he's like, David, you spared me, and I recognize that you're going to be king, and go on, and I forgive and I release. But when he gets back to the throne, and all of a sudden, all the whispers and the thoughts and the things start triggering inside of him again, then it begins to stir up everything in him again, to where he grabs another army of people and he goes after him a second time. Sometimes even if we are able to work things out with people, how many know the enemy doesn't just, oh man, they worked it out, let me just walk away. Oh, shucks. No, he comes back and he starts whispering in the ear again, and he starts sending people, and he starts doing all this stuff to try to stir everything right back up again. And Saul chases after him again. In 1 Samuel chapter 26, David comes upon Saul and his army, and it says that the Lord had put him into a deep sleep. And David goes in and he takes one of his guys with him, Abishai, and they sneak up by King Saul. And David is just, again, going to show him that he could have killed him, and he didn't. He's still trying to prove his innocence. He's still trying to say, like, I know you have something against me, but I don't have anything against you. Like, I know you threw spears at me and stuff, but that's all right. I'm not going to forgive it. Move on. And Abishai is right there beside him, and Abishai isn't quite as holy as David, and he knows that in the cave that he came to David and he said, hey, this is God trying to let you kill him, go kill him. And he just kind of figures that, well, maybe David didn't want to technically do it, but maybe I could get away with it. Let me see if David will let me do it. And verse 8, it says, then Abishai said to David and said, God has given your enemy into this hand this day. Now please let me, I know you don't want to do it, that's fine, I understand it and everything, but let me pin him to the earth right now. One stroke of the spear, I won't even need to strike him twice. I got it. David, I can, gone. Just give me the shot. I can do it. But David wouldn't even let other people defend him. David said to Abishai, do not destroy him, for who can put their hand against the Lord's anointed and still be guiltless? And David said, as the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him down, or a day will come when he will die, or he will go down and he'll die in battle and he will perish. What's he saying? David's like, I don't want you to be guilty of any of this either. If you get involved in this and you take up my fence and you do all this, then your hands are going to be dirty and God's going to be against you. I don't want that to happen for you. Don't do anything. One day, he'll pass away. God will take care of it in his own timing and in his own way. But the Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the one that the Lord has anointed. But take now the spear that is at his head and the jug of water. and let's go. David completely, like, it's one thing for you not to act, but it's a whole nother level when you're looking around and saying, listen, I don't want you to defend. I don't want you to take the offense. I don't want you to get your hands dirty with this either. Because God is big enough and God is great enough. And if God anointed me, he'll get me where I'm supposed to be one day. And I don't have to make it happen, and you don't have to make it happen. God will make it happen. Do you see the trust that David put in God? Even when he had every right. He had the right to the throne. He had all the... No matter what, he's still, I'm not getting my hands dirty. I want God to be for me. Guys, when we get in these conflicts and these things with other people, and we can have all the right, and we can have everybody tell us all the reasons why we're justified to strike back, why we're justified to post what we want to post, why we're justified to do all those things. But you know what happens? The only thing that happens is your hands get dirty. Because you started engaging in that war. And Jesus took it like murder is not just killing somebody, but Jesus said if a man has become angry in his heart with somebody, then he has already committed murder in his heart. Can you imagine what it would feel like to not just once walk up on somebody who has tried to kill you and have the opportunity, and then you try to make it right and everything, and then you find out here they are again. They're coming again. They're not giving up. Like, you can be like, okay, God, I tried your way once and it didn't work. I tried to be holy. I tried to spare him. But now is the time to take... David didn't do that. And I have to wonder. I can't prove it. I can't... this is just me thinking. If David already made the statement about, and heard the statement about not overcoming evil with evil and kind of living out that thing, then maybe David understood what Paul wrote when he wrote in Ephesians chapter 6, that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against rulers and against authorities and against cosmic powers in present darkness, against spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. Maybe David understood that this attack and this stuff that was coming, it wasn't the individual, it wasn't Saul. It was evil spirits trying to influence Saul and trying to attack him. And so he separated Saul from the evil spirit and the demonic spirit that was trying to attack him. And he said, I'm not going to wipe out Saul because of what he's being influenced to do right now. Maybe David's heart was that Saul would repent and that Saul would change. And if he takes it into his hands in that moment, there's no opportunity for repentance. So I'm keeping my hands clean. I'm putting my life not in his hands. I'm putting my life in the hands of God. When David bowed down his face to the earth, he was not putting his life in King Saul's hands. He was putting it in God's hands. Because he trusted that the God who spoke the word over him was also the God who was able, the God who declared to Samuel, anoint this one, this is going to be the king, this is the man who's after my own heart, was the God who was going to be able to bring him into his destiny. He understood that people cannot make us not fulfill the destiny on our life. It's only when we decide to engage in wrong and engage in sin and engage in gossip and engage in backbiting and engage in slander and engage in and start throwing stones and throwing spears back. It's only then that we can eliminate ourselves. trust God that he truly is our defense. I don't have time to read it, but go read Psalm 27. Psalm 27 is a psalm that David wrote as he's running for his life from King Saul. And he doesn't deny the fact of the attack. He doesn't deny the fact of all the things that are coming his way. But he wraps it up like this: I will wait for the Lord. I will wait upon God. That's what he's telling Abishai. Listen, we're not going to take his life. We're going to wait for God to take his life whichever way that he chooses to. Whether it's of old age or it's a battle or whatever. I'm not going to make myself climb to the throne. I'm going to wait for God to bring me to that place. Do we have that type of faith in God? Do we have that type of love for people? I mean, I don't know about you. I've never had anybody try to kill me. Never had anybody take a shot at me. Never had anybody throw a spear at me. You know, Pastor Jonathan has. But there's probably very few of us who've experienced that type of attack. And if David can refuse to take life and to fight back under that type of attack, then shouldn't we be able to do the same thing under an attack of words, an attack of social media, an attack on our character? I want it to be said of me, Brandon is a man after God's own heart. I want it to be said of our church, that is a church that is after God's heart. Man, they love people. They don't give up on people. They're like the father who just waits for them to return, and when they return, they don't condemn them. They just run and grab them and welcome them back. So glad to see you. That's what I want to be said of me. Is that what you want to be said of you? Now, listen, to say you want that is easier said than done. And if you say you want that, I'm just going to tell you, there's probably some spears that are going to come your way. There's probably some stones that will come your way. There's going to be some opportunities that the enemy comes in to try to set you up. But will you be like David and say, God, I trust you. You are my defense. You are my strong tower. You are my refuge. You are my rock and my fortress. I'm just going to hide in you. And I'm just going to wait